Photographic Composition, Lecture 5, The Digital Darkroom, Part 3. Annie Leibowitz is known primarily as a celebrity photographer, as is David LaChapelle. And lately she has been engaging in more and more complex imagery, taking photographs of various elements or appropriating them and combining them in these very complicated tableaus. And this is a riff on the Cinderella story, of course, which is an important mainstay of the Disney Corporation, which hired her to do these. Robert and Shana Park Robinson are fine art photographers who stage elaborate scenes and then do a fair amount of work in the darkroom afterwards, but overlaying all of their photographs with this sense of processes that refer to the 19th century as opposed to the 21st century. They're heavy on allegory and make no pretense to being real. Martin Parr is an interesting example in photography in that he is very well known and highly respected as a photojournalist. That's how he began. And yet he also does personal work that bears very little resemblance to his editorial work. In this case, he has done a series of self-portraits appearing as personas rather than as himself, as it were. He has also added elaborate framing, and the images are generally quite complicated. In fact, this is it has very little photography left in it. I believe the face, the head is really the only thing that remains in this that's photographic. Not only the frame, but also the shirt that he's wearing and the pin that he has stuck to the shirt are actually made out of wood, as is the frame. Back in the 1980s, David Hockney, the painter, experimented with photography, and in this case, and generally in photographing scenes and then recombining them after having made many, many exposures. In this case, he was working with Polaroid cameras, and we have an image that has over 100 prints in it, and very laborious, not with the intention of actually replicating what was in front of him, but creating this other entity that only used reality as sort of a springboard. Thomas Kellner, a German photographer, has been doing work very similar to what we just saw in Hockney's. He takes 35 millimeter film, only shoots film, and has a very elaborate process whereby he pans a scene and alternately rotates the camera left and right, so he ends up with this kind of zigzag, fractalized image made from, at times, hundreds of small images, which are then contact printed in these large grids. And this is, I believe, Times Square. Joel Grimes is an editorial photographer who, and also does a fair amount of advertising work for various sports products and also for sporting publications. He will very often photograph a scene that he knows that he would like to use as a background, and then in the studio he will photograph athletes in various poses, such as this, under conditions that he can, in which he can control the lighting, which is also quite elaborate, and then combines the images in Photoshop. This is another example, but a portrait done in the same manner, also by Joel Grimes. This image is taking the notion of a portrait and kind of standing it on its head, as it were, using the idea that this person was actually composed of the leaves of a book or a magazine. This is the kind of thing that's possible in Photoshop. It's time-consuming, but it is possible to create the illusion that what we're looking at is actually possible in real life, when clearly it can't be. This is also more of the same kind of manipulation that goes on in Photoshop. What this usually requires is a fair amount of forethought, because you have to have some notion of where you're going in order to create images that are going to work together as these do. Here we have a portrait and a wider shot that was then dropped in of the same person, but he would have had to have been posed in just such a way so that it would look like he was sitting as he does here. And then some kind of like a purse or something else with a zipper on it was then used to create the illusion that the head could actually be opened with a zipper. And here's a composite of what appears to be a cadaver and a living person, done in such a way that it looks like it's the same person at the same time. And this is a fairly elaborate scene in which imagery at different scales has been combined. The walls were photographed at one time. The cascading water is actually a composite of several cascading waters, and it looks like perhaps there's a moon or something in the background, and then this very small person in sort of at the foot of the cascading water. This is a visual joke, and I think we all get the joke. Again, combining one kind of imagery with another, with just the faintest allusion to an actual person. In this, hard to say what this kind of filigree is. The next few selections are of images that have been deliberately manipulated to show the skills of the retoucher. And in each case, they've taken a photograph that's been submitted to them that needs, and we'll put quotes around this, cleaning up. In each case, I understand the need for it, given various requirements of clients. I mean, most of these are commercial images, but in the process, very often there's something, there's a fair amount of life being drained out of the images. I think the one on the left, while it's not spectacular by any means, is much more lifelike than the one on the right. And here we have a fairly straightforward image on the left, and I'm not sure, but it appears that the what looks like a blouse is in fact a tattoo. I don't know whether that's true or not, but a rather interesting portrait, which has been rendered kind of cartoonish in the one on the right, where additional eye makeup or tattooing has been applied to the to the left eye, the right eye, and color has been drained out of it and replaced with these other kind of peculiar colors. And here we have a close-up of a woman's face where clearly there are blemishes and other things that the client probably did not want, either the subject of the photograph didn't want to have show, or it was representing a product of some sort and they wanted to have a more idealized version, as you can see on the right. Car photography now involves a fair amount of manipulation, in some cases a great deal of manipulation. The car and the scene don't necessarily ever have to come together except in Photoshop. And here we can see it's pretty clear how that's been achieved. The actual combining takes a great deal of time and patience and skill, but it is certainly very doable with today's technology. And here the photographer has combined a number of images and created the illusion of a road that is actually being dragged into the landscape. And here roadways have actually been manipulated to look like they've been tied in knots. And this is used to illustrate how complex our system of roadways have become. By using selective color, this eye really pops, but then an additional layer or two have been added with these striations running through the iris, making it look quite surreal. It looks very much of the digital age. It doesn't look like a reflection so much as something that's actually embedded in the iris. Clearly, this would never actually happen in reality.